Okay, so what's the bonus? That was an amazing conversation with Ken about George Washington. How could we top it? We need to talk von Steuben. So von Steuben is a Prussian military officer and has some aristocratic clout, but decides that he needs to come over to the US. And he's coming over more because he needs a job, but he comes over and he makes an impact. And he doesn't just come in and say, "All right, all you guys who know nothing, I'm going to teach you the right way." He adjusts his approach and figures out what meets the moment. And I think that's why the story is even more interesting, is because this isn't somebody who's just going, "Hey, I know what's going on in this Prussian army and I'm going to make you successful because you're going to copy me and you're going to copy what I do." That's not the story you're about to hear. The story you're about to hear is how von Steuben said, "Okay, I have all this background, but let me figure out what works here and now." And that's how the American army became a different army, an improved army with von Steuben. Enjoy. So, Ken, I'm so excited about the bonus contact because we're going to talk about von Steuben, which is a name that just rolls off the tongue, and obviously. But the reason for it is you really get into Valley Forge, you talk von Steuben, you hear him, but he's not a name unless you really dive in that you hear in the normal history lore, is what I would say. So why don't we talk about, because you mentioned when we were doing the earlier conversation that there were a lot of military leaders that saw what was happening here in the Continental Army and said, "Ooh, opportunity. I don't have work here in Europe. I can go over here and get work." Like it's not like this is my country. It's I'm looking for work. And von Steuben was one of those. So why don't you talk about a little bit about his background and then we can talk about how he gets to
Sure,
Valley Forge.
happy to. Von Steuben is an interesting character, and I want to sort of make a parallel with when we talked about Washington, Elaine. He's somebody else who has been failed by the rubric.
Oh, I like the analogy. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
He's been failed by the traditional rubric. He grows up within the Prussian nobility, the aristocracy. He is from something called the Junker class, which is not high end, extremely wealthy Prussian nobility, but it is a stratosphere of the Prussian nobility nonetheless. One of his eight godfathers, yes, he had eight of them. Calvinists can do things a little bit differently in the 18th century in Prussia, was Frederick I, who is the emperor of Prussia. So while he may not have been at von Steuben's baptism in Magdeburg in the 17th,
He is still associated.
he's associated and he's agreed to do it, which tells you that this family has influence. This family is well connected. They have power. And for a young person in Prussia in the 18th century, one of the greatest things that you could do was military service to the Prussian state. It was a pathway to success. It was a potential pathway to fortune, and it was an honorable pathway. Von Steuben's father serves in the Prussian military, and that's supposed to be von Steuben's career as well. And as early as the age of 14, he is accompanying his father when his father is working as an officer in a Prussian army.
And there was a method to the Prussian way of doing military. So if you're learning the Prussian model, you're learning the model.
The military model that they have is a really interesting one, and a portion of that model is what I want to focus on because I think it sets up von Steuben for success later when he serves in the Continental Army. For any cadet who is looking to become a commissioned officer in the Prussian Army in the 18th century, and von Steuben's going through that process as a teenager, 16, 17 years old, one of the phases of cadet life is something called Freikorporal. And a Freikorporal is neither an enlisted soldier, nor is he yet a commissioned officer, but he bears some of the responsibilities of a commissioned officer. And he's not supposed to fraternize with enlisted personnel. So it's an individual who oddly has their foot in both worlds. But what I think is very helpful from a cultural perspective is he's learning a few things from a leadership perspective. A, if you're going to lead people, you have to know them, know what makes them tick, know what their needs are, know what their wants are,
Yes.
know how they respond, honor them. And from the other perspective is what is your actual responsibility as a leader? So he's learning both of those things in that Freikorporal stage. If you fast forward a little bit, he will be a commissioned officer who serves in the European theater of the 7 Years' War, which we call the French Indian War here. So as George Washington is serving in North America
Yeah.
during the French Indian War, von Steuben is serving Prussia during the 7 Years' War. And he sees very hard service. He is wounded multiple times. He actually spends a period as a prisoner of war of the Russians at Treptow on the Russian front. And during the war, he rose to the rank of captain and was serving on the staff of Frederick the Great at one point in time during that
So,
war.
in one way you could say it, he is accomplished what the goal was for his life trajectory under the Prussian model.
Under the Prussian model, and sort of another parallel to Washington, kind of on the rise.
Yes.
And then something happens. In Washington's world, the rubric begins to fail him when Braddock passes away.
Yeah.
And Loudon will not recognize Washington. For von Steuben, when the 7 Years' War ends in 1763, his stock is on the rise and so is his star. And he is going to be appointed to study at a special school that is operated by the Emperor of Prussia, and it is a predecessor of the German military staff school. It is a school that is designed to train the next generation of general officers in the Prussian army. The Spezialklasse Kriegskunst is what it's called.
Okay.
12 students are to be admitted. For some reason, which is really not well defined or documented, von Steuben runs afoul of a very fluent, influential general in the Prussian army and is booted from the special school and is out of work as a military officer at that point in time. So then spends this period
Trying to figure it out.
trying to figure himself out.
And I'm not going to tell the whole thing because it's quite an interesting story how he gets from there to gets to France to talk to Franklin, to talk to Adams, to talk to, and all of a sudden, I'm going to fast forward the story. He's now at Valley Forge.
He's at Valley Forge.
Now, this isn't, I mean, he's kind of coming when Washington is exhausted. Like, it's not like, ooh, this is new. Like, and I'm going to say because we can do it in any organization or corporation. There's sometimes where you're excited about, especially as you're trying to grow capabilities, you're excited about new leadership. You're excited about somebody who might know how to do it. He's on the I'm kind of over it moment because there's been a lot of flood of officers that have already come over from Europe and they feel like they're tapped out. So he has to prove himself a little bit when he shows up.
He has to prove himself quite a bit. And yeah, Washington's got fatigue of some of the foreign officers, and the American officer corps has fatigue from some of the foreign officers that are coming over. Yeah, not every French or Polish officer or Germanic officer who came here was one who wanted to fight for the ideals of liberty and freedom. Some of them were just seeking opportunity. Some of them were charlatans, and some of them weren't very good. There were some that were great. But, Washington has a fatigue. And also for the officers serving in the Continental Army from a fairness perspective, they have a gripe that individuals who have never served on this continent, who may not understand them, who have difficulties with language, are being promoted over them. And it's basically somebody saying, like, I've got the seniority, I put the time in here. You're bringing in this person from the outside and promoting over me.
Who probably has the mental model, if you were to listen to the previous conversation, of they outrank the people that they're, and why can't I just crack the whip and these people are doing it? And to von Steuben's credit, he comes over and goes, I didn't know what I was getting, but I see something in these men that you don't see otherwise. I see an intention and an idea and a soul and a commitment that I need to cultivate. Instead of treating them just like soldiers that I would in the past model, I need to change how I think about
He
this.
does, and he's willing to come here as a volunteer. I think is really important. He doesn't show up as a general, right? He's not given a commission by the Continental Congress. And von Steuben gets to Valley Forge kind of in the middle of the encampment, and at a time when they've gotten through the worst portion of the winter in terms of weather, but the worst portion of the winter in terms of the supply situation. Like, they're kind of at their nadir when von Steuben arrives. So he's seeing this army at its worst. So imagine walking into the biggest portion of the mess as somebody who's there from a volunteer.
Oh, and by the way, he has a Prussian military mindset and he's supposed to help. And you're like, you're kidding me, right?
Yeah, he's horrified. I mean, he says as much about the lack of attention to hygiene issues, about the lack of general discipline in the army, about the state of the arms and equipment, about the lack of supplies, about the men themselves, and the fact that there is no standard doctrine for military drill that is consistent throughout the entire Continental Army. He's horrified by all of these things. And, as you said, as a Prussian aristocrat, he might have looked at this and said, no, I'm out of here. But he doesn't. And I think going back to that phase of his life as Freikorporal when he's a cadet, he takes the time to personally get to know them. He goes through a tour of inspection of the entire encampment.
And he is convinced this is worthy. in his mind. Like there is something here that he wanted to influence, he wanted to impact, he wanted to do this. And then you can see the commitment that he's about to do. Now, let's pause, because in any story that we've ever done, from when somebody else, I don't care if it's your student and you still see a new teacher who swoops in and thinks they can do it bigger or better, or in a corporation where you get the new boss who's going to write the organization and they do all of this. What's the first thing you do? Not here. You don't know me. But he's able to say, I'm not going to come in and you must do it my way or the highway.
Yep.
And this is the thing I want to pause, because he's got a model, but he goes, okay, I need to make this model successful here. And I've gotten to know, like you were saying, how he had to go between two roles. I've got to figure out how it's going to work here and what elements are going to work and what is not going to work. And where do I prioritize things? Because he doesn't just do the full drill that he's learned over there. He goes, no, what you guys are doing isn't impactful. Take that out of, I just need them to do this. And if they can do this, they're going to be successful.
Yeah, exactly. He thinks about all the options that are in front of him. And I think this is really smart. It's him being a smart leader at a fundamental level. Get to know your team, get to know their strengths, get to know their weaknesses, get to know their needs, get to know relational communications and how that's going to work. And where do you want, after you know all this, where do you want to get these people? What is your goal? What do you want to do? Why are you here? What is your purpose? His purpose is to professionalize them and instill discipline. So then he looks at the model he has in front of him. There's an English model. There's a French model. There's a Prussian model. Looking at all of them, he makes the decision that all of this is far too complicated. Like, we can really make this efficient if I take certain elements from each and boil it down to how do we make this most simple.
Because he didn't want to make them some gorgeous fighting force that met some just kind of predefined success. He's like, I just want to make them effective. And he wants to take these people, and to be effective, I'm not going to bust their morale. I need to make their morale effective.
He wants them to look professional in a European sense. And he can do that with this new code of drill that he is going to create. He just takes away all the superfluous flummery, as Lincoln might call it, right? The superfluous flummery of drill that might look extra special and pretty in some instances. He strips all that out. And just, what's the simplest way to get from point A to point B? Whether it be how a soldier faces right, left, or about, how a soldier marches, how a soldier does the manual of arms, or how blocks of soldiers then maneuver on a field. How do we make that more efficient? And he does it in a way that is a turnkey approach. He can't obviously go train the whole army himself.
Well, and let's transition to that, because if you've got pride of ownership, like you've created a model that's unlike anything else, in any other situation, then when you have pride of ownership, you own it. But that's the other brilliant moment when I got to know his story that I think is really interesting, because then I'm going to use a modern day term. He started to train the trainers.
Yes.
Like, and that's when you start to say, when you, like how you articulated where he sat when he was marrying the Prussian army, because then he realizes he can't be with the people. He has to go back into that leadership position. So he has to duplicate himself. So he's going to put what he expects in a manual, and he's going to start to train the trainers, because he needs the trainers to train someone else.
And I think one of the things that sort of maybe inadvertently serves him really well is he's coming from Prussia. He spent a lot of time in the Germanic states. He's traveled all over Europe, right, throughout his life. He's never been to America before, so he's got a cultural blindness to some of the differences between the sections and the colonies. When von Steuben gets here and decides to create this core of model drill instructors to work with, he takes men from Washington's Life Guard, but he also picks men from units throughout the Army. So all of a sudden now you've got North Carolinians and perhaps Rhode Islanders or men from Connecticut, Pennsylvania.
There's almost a benefit that he doesn't know.
Yep, you got to work together with each other. And I think what he helps to do with that is he helps that burgeoning sense of nationalism that's quietly growing within the Army, that sense of national identity, when he puts them all together and makes them work together this way. And the other thing that is a culture shock that he instills is personal instruction. You know, the old British model that the Americans used in many instances for drill, even the lower ranks of officers typically did not participate in drilling the men. That activity was left to sergeants, looking at separation of social stratosphere. But here's this Prussian who's an aristocrat who is now
There.
He is meeting the moment. He is at the event, and he is face to face with common man.
And just to make the story even more impactful, probably cursing in multiple languages that nobody on the other side knows.
Right, because he doesn't speak any English.
No.
But so
He translates through somebody who knows
so
French.
he has French or German translators. So, I mean, it's pretty wild how he's doing this. He's got this core of men that he's assembled and picked to teach his new way. And he's using rote physical example or working through translators as the man is learning English as a second language on the fly.
But he's also watching these train the trainers, not just for the actions or how they're following the letter of the law, but also the spirit of the law, because he's holding them accountable for how they're taking care of their men.
Yeah, he is. And I think that's one of the most important, for me, if I look at von Steuben's impact, the things that he does with discipline and drill, they're critical. And what he can actually accomplish at Valley Forge in the time period he has is the basics are getting taught. But that train the trainer methodology means that expands over time to other portions of the army that may not be.
He has no of an influence. He's built enough to let it go.
Let it go, and he's willing to let that happen. And he's wise enough to know that he does not have to micromanage the situation. He does not have to be on top of it in every area. He's willing to teach them to let that happen. When von Steuben writes the Blue Book, and the earliest elements, of course, are happening at Valley Forge as he's writing out notes of what he wants to accomplish. But when the full book is written, he tackles that in late 1778. And he writes it in Philadelphia, and it's published in 1779 for the first time by Steiner and Sist. What you were getting at is sort of the second half of the book. You know, the first half is all of those military maneuver. How do we execute them? Where are the commands? How are the men supposed to do it? But the other half of the book deals with responsibility. Based on whatever your rank is in this army, you're responsible.
We're not here to support your elevated status. You're responsible too.
You have a duty of care. And what is your duty of care to the people that you lead? And that is a critical culture shift moment within the context of the Continental Army as well. Because now it's codified, right? You're accountable as an officer in a certain way, shape, or form. And depending upon your rank or your job function, this is your area of accountability. And if you can't be accountable, then somebody else is going to do that job.
And this is why I wanted to take time to tell the story, because there's so many moments. Okay, you show up, you have been privileged, whatever, or privileged in your thinking is what you can say. I mean, we all have been there where your experience makes you feel like you know what you're doing, etc. And he didn't come in going, I need you to be like me and mimic me. He needed to meet them. And he knew it was going to be more successful the simpler it was. Like, let's think about that for a second, because normally people come in, and I've been a consultant in the past life, so I know of what, right? And you think, the fancier the bells and the whistles, the more it's going to be worthy. But he saw value in the simplicity because he knew it would be more successful. And then that allowed him to be more successful as he was training the trainers to get the process evolving and to pull people together instead of being, all right, I got you. We're going to make you amazing. Because that wasn't what was going to be successful.
No, and nobody wants to hear that, because I understand exactly what you're saying. And I've done consulting too, from that consulting perspective, and I've been on both sides of the coin. You consult where you worked with consultants, and when someone comes in with that approach of we're going to make you the best, we're like, you've just devalued everything I was before.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And he doesn't do that. And I think that's really critical. He does not devalue these people.
No, he says, I want to make you better.
I want to make you better. And I'm going to be present through every moment if they're making you better.
And I'm not only going to make you better, but I'm going to make the person above you accountable for making you better and accountable for your duty of care. And they're accountable for your care.
And unbeknownst to those men he's working with, the vast majority of the time that he's at Valley Forge doing this work, he has no official rank. He has no real pay. He's serving basically as a volunteer who Washington has been given authority to make von Steuben the temporary inspector general of the army. He's doing this with the promise of nothing.
And this is where I think he would much more interesting, and that's why I want to highlight his story, is because he showed up and saw people that he wanted to honor. He got there because he needed a job.
Yep.
But he stayed there because he wanted to be part of the solution and the impact.
And he does refer to America as his new home. He does get to a point in the war where he realizes that this is his home now. This is not a quick junket where he's going to come to America, serve in the military,
And
go back over to Europe again. Without a doubt, he thinks about those things. There's a natural progression. There's a point in time where he's thinking he might, after service in America, go serve in the French army. But he gets to a point where he wants this to be his home.
I think that's a great evolution with this. Well, I hope as we've told the story, this whets everybody's appetite to learn more about von Steuben, the adopted American, as almost all of us are at some point. So thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Elaine. It was a pleasure.
Appreciate this. Love to talk to you guys soon.